Hi everybody, welcome to Chapter 7. Hopefully you had a relatively trouble-free weekend with all the snow that we've had. Hopefully you didn't have to get in your car and travel somewhere or shovel out from under feet of snow because of snow drifts, things like that. Obviously great for the resorts, but of course you can't get to them yet because, the roads are quite a problem. But anyway, hopefully a good weekend. Hopefully a restful weekend if you didn't have to go outside. So we're in Chapter 7, Management and Leadership. And this is kind of a tale of two cities from a couple of perspectives. From the chapter standpoint, occasionally I have once in a while a bone to pick with the chapter. This chapter is no exception. This chapter, the first couple pages, I do have some issues with. Okay, and I'll be straightforward and level with you about that. The rest of the chapter is pretty good, actually very good, as far as in a very logical way discussing the functions and the processes of successful management. So, kudos to most of the chapter, but the first couple pages of it, I am going to point out a few things that I, just from personal experience, don't find to be quite right. And this is to broaden your perspective because my students deserve nothing but the best. It's true, really. So, by the way, to that end, this is like the fourth recording of this video I've done. The first one I did right after the COVID vaccine. And it's all what they tell you it is. It's your arm will hurt for about a day. And then after that, the biggest problem I had was my energy level was just at rock bottom. And I did some research on it, and that's to be expected because your body really only has, for lack of a better term, only so much mojo. And your body's energy is being put into developing those antibodies for COVID-19. So that sort of takes energy away from everything else. So even if you get a good night's sleep, you still feel a little run down because your body's working overtime to build up the resistance to the COVID. So, and then the second shot comes in a couple of weeks. But yeah, so the first lecture, I watched it again and I was like, oof, I can't. For those of you who have already seen it by looking, I've got subscribers to my YouTube channel. First of all, my apologies to those of you who might have already seen it because it's not my best foot forward, at least. I tried as hard as I could, but that was the mind-making promises the body couldn't keep because I was just really weary. By the way, and if you feel free to subscribe to that YouTube channel, you can join my legion of 14 followers. But I've got over 3,000 views, so that's good. I don't know what I'm going to do next semester. Next semester will be in person. Nobody's going to have to watch any of these videos anymore. I mean, I'm going to keep them up because if people want to review and they just want to listen to these chapters be discussed, they're there to be had, but I'm not going to keep every lecture up. I'm just going to sort of put together the greatest hits type of thing. So the poster child is from Under Armour. Kevin Plank, the CEO of Under Armour. Well, former CEO. He's resigned. He's still on the board, but they brought in some new management. More about that later. But Under Armour's really hit some potholes. The way the company got founded is something I could relate to perfectly. I mean, Kevin Plank is from Baltimore. I grew up in upstate New York. In the summer, and in the fall, both those places are extremely humid. So if you play football, which both of us did, Plank was a defensive back, I was a linebacker, and you have to wear something under your shoulder pads. Normally, for me, that was like a thick cotton shirt because those pads would tear your skin if you didn't have something underneath it. Problem with thick cotton shirts was they'd get just drenched with sweat and heavy in that humidity. And Plank, being a defensive back, which was by nature a position that needed more speed, was so frustrated that he would like take off his equipment between quarters and put on a dry, fresh, clean shirt, which would be all right for a few minutes, but then after that it would be back to being soaked and heavy again. So he was thinking, well, there's got to be a better way. And he'd go up to the garment district in New York City and meet with people, and he's like, look, I'm looking for a fabric that will protect but breathe. And he came on a great combination for it, and started the company that way, and making it for football players, hence the name Under Armour, because it was supposed to fit under your football armor, under your football pads, and that's where the name comes from. And then they did something that a lot of companies do, some well and some very poorly, which is they get successful in one space and then they try to be all things to all people. And so then they diversify it out into baseball, like Bryce Harper wears Under Armour cleats, and Missy Copeland, the New York Metropolitan Ballet, wears Under Armour shoes apparently. So there's a variety of sports that golf. So a number of golfers wear Under Armour shirts, and they're very good. I mean, when I go to the gym, or of course with post-COVID, when I go back to the gym, I have Under Armour stuff that I wear to the gym because it is lightweight and it's very breathable. So that's a good combination. Now, from a fashion standpoint, by the way, because they started getting into this fashion aspect of the clothing, when you see people my age wearing something, it's no longer trendy. Okay, I get it. If you bought a stock that's been rising because of it's hip and cool, and then you start seeing people my age in it, sell. That's one piece of investment advice I can give you with a great deal of confidence. Not to be self-deprecating about it, but it is what it is. See geezers walking around in it. You don't have a lot of street cred if you're wearing it, okay? So there you go. So that's that. So going back to focusing back on the chapter 7 at hand. But let me bring you up to date on some things with Under Armour. Okay. There's an article in the New York Times about Under Armour that was written less than a year ago. It says, once heralded as the next Nike, Under Armour has faltered, hurt by slumping scales and unflattering revelations about its corporate culture. I'll get into those in a minute. It said it was the darling of investors, but has since faced tough scrutiny, resulting in lawsuits from shareholders who I'm going to get a sip of water. Sorry, throat's dry. Time out. Thank you. Darling of the investors, but it results from lawsuits from shareholders, misleading investors, media coverage around questionable real estate deals involving the company and Mr. Plank's private holdings. Questions have also arisen about a culture that allows strip club visits to be expensed on corporate credit cards. I'll leave it there. And then they've been slapped with investigations from both the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice. What's the difference, you may ask? Well, an SEC, or Securities and Exchange Commission, investigation means that you've done something perceived as wrongdoing by the people who manage stock transactions and oversee the stock exchanges. And typically, a conviction in that area results in heavy fines. Okay, you might get fined hundreds of millions of dollars if it's big enough, if it seems to be fraudulent enough. But on top of that, they've been hit with a Department of Justice investigation. What's the difference? Well, a Department of Justice investigation is a criminal investigation, which means that Mr. Plank stands the possibility of being frog walked out the front door of the headquarters and gets chauffeured trip to county to plead his case in a courtroom, and possibly another chauffeur-driven trip to, the Huskow to share a cell with somebody. There is that possibility. Now, everything's, of course, innocent until proven guilty, number one. Number two, it's the investigation is ongoing. So people are not commenting on it from either side, really. So you're not going to, see much in the news about it until something gets determined. I mean, they may try to plea bargain their way out of it. But with the Department of Justice, that really has to do with stock manipulation. In other words, some examples of companies that have been hit with DOJ fines are those that cooked the books or pushed revenue out of one quarter into another to make growth look better. And that, of course, better growth means better stock price. And a lot of these executives get compensated on how the stock performance is doing. So there's a big financial incentive for them to do some chicanery in some cases. Revenue growth has slumped, increasing less than 1% for the first time for the first 9 months of last year. And the stock, which used to be $51 a few years ago, has now dropped under $20. So Under Armour has lost more than half of its stock market value. And then examples of things are they bring in outside management. They bring in people from Nike and other companies to get a fresh set of eyes, but then they wouldn't listen to them. And so some of these people would come over from Nike, and then 2 or 3 years later they quit out of frustration. They'd say, well, yeah, we got hired to give an objective input as to what was going on, but they wouldn't listen to us. So, it was kind of a waste of everybody's time. Product choices, again, try to get it be more fashionable. That leads to people like me. They came out with a product called DJ, which was a slip-on shoe for women that sold terribly. But DJ was named after his wife, whose initials are DJ. And so nobody wanted to kill the product because that would offend. Kevin Plank's wife loved the shoe, and by killing the product, that would piss off Mrs. Plank, and nobody wanted to go to Kevin Plank and say, hey, you need to get rid of this terrible product because it's not selling anything. So those are just a few examples of their issues. Just trying to see if I put any other notes down. No, that's the major part of it. So now on to the book. So that's the saga of Mr. Plank, unfortunately. But, he's the poster child for leadership and management. And as you can see, life comes at you fast and things change quickly. And in his business, he was king of the hill. And now his stock price is worth half of what it used to. And his legal team is working on keeping him out of significant trouble with government agencies, and no bueno. Okay, so don't run your company that way. So now we move on to the text. The text, like I say, this is where I have a little indigestion. The first thing you talk about is bosses in general and management in general. And they said at one time managers were called bosses and their jobs consisted of telling people what to do. Today, however, most managers tend to be more collaborative. They emphasize teams and team building. They create drop-in centers and open work areas. Okay, so McGraw-Hill says we've got over 600 years of academic experience in this book. Okay, my family, 5 kids and a dad and a mom. Mom's job was to raise us, but between the 6 of us, we probably had over 200 years working experience in the world, and none of us had collaborative managers that open drop-in spaces and open work areas. All of mine were bosses, and their job consisted of telling us what to do. So that part of the lecture I'm just gonna skip over, because no, that's really, you got to temper what's academically thought out as being the best practice to what's really out there in the world. And quite frankly, that's not, okay? We could discuss this offline anytime you want to. And, you know, like I said last week, I'll be called in front of the McGraw-Hill Tribunal. I find your lack of faith disturbing. Well, I mean, keep it real is one of the mottos of this course, and you know, I'm just trying to let you know what to expect when you get out there. Okay, so you know, shame on me if that's somebody finds that not good. But now, putting that in the rearview mirror and moving forward, the rest of the chapter is pretty good. Got to give credit. I'd be like an academic if I didn't acknowledge the good aspects of the chapter, of which there are many. So, first is they do a very good job of detailing the four functions of management. First being planning. Okay, when you're a CEO, your first function is to set the course of the ship. You know, where are you going to steer it? And he or she needs to decide the strategic direction. Now, keep in mind one important concept is strategic versus tactical. Strategic is long-term planning. Tactical is short-term. How do we accomplish our short-term goals is one discussion. And then how do we look out over the horizon and see what we should be doing for 1 or 2 or 3 years out, depending on the sort of the cycle of your products. We'll talk more about that later too. And that's what a CEO's primary function is to do, is to plan, is to set the goal. First of all, set the example for a company, and secondly, and set the goals from a lot of examples. We talked about business ethics. You should be an ethical leader. You should be a hardworking leader. You shouldn't ask things of your people that you're not doing for yourself, okay? But also to create the strategic vision. Which way are we headed and why are we headed that way? As a leader, you need to clearly articulate that. And those are things you'll develop as time goes on. Okay, so we're at the 18-minute mark. So we'll drop off here and then regain our vibe on the next section, which will be coming up momentarily. Thanks.